Yeah, that may be because, I don't know why that is. One is it's 8 in the morning. That's never a popular time slot. The other is this committee is actually before some of the other committees.
You're running simultaneous with one I'm supposed to be in, which is related to you right now.
Exactly. It's also simultaneous to one of our co-sponsoring committees, which is the emerging, probably, is that the AP 020?
They said they're going to do their house cleaning and then come on up. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. But it works?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good. So unfortunately, yeah, I don't know, this is probably the lowest turnout that we've had at this meeting. But again, I think it has to do with timing, and we just weren't able to make announcements in the meetings that are going to be this afternoon. So usually this happens afterwards. But hey, come on in. So here's one of our speakers right here. Have a seat. Real quickly, just to we'll just go ahead and get started. People may or may not trickle in. The agenda is here. And Hunter, are you going to be here the whole time?
Yeah.
Can you do me the great honor of taking some notes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Cherry. Geoff Rose is co-chair of this subcommittee. He's at Monash University and is not able to be here this round. So he's still engaged in this and interested in e-bike research, of course. And he may or may not be online. I don't know. It's just a very different time zone right now in Australia. I don't know what time it is, but coming around, Casey, can you pass around a sign-in sheet too, just so I don't have to try to remember who was here? And so the exciting thing about this TRB, I think, is that we had 15 papers that touched on e-bikes in some way. And Christopher, you don't have to sit in the back row either.
Because this thing has no the battery dies.
Okay, but there's a plug on here too if you want, but you don't have to sit with us if you don't want
to. That takes care of it.
Yeah. And so there's 15 papers this year, and that's pretty impressive, I think. I know it's noisy, but can you leave it open so people at least feel welcome to walk in? Okay. Sorry. Policy papers. So about half of these papers, I would guess, are related to. Closed again, JP. About half of these papers are related to China. So you could say that Chinese-oriented papers are different in context to Western papers, European and North American papers, but nonetheless, they're still interesting findings, of course, from what goes on in China. And part of that is related to how different e-bikes are and infrastructure is in China. So going down the list, electric bicycle licensing in China, that's one of their levers they have to control their population of e-bikes and the design of e-bikes, and about half or so of the e-bikes are actually registered in cities that I've visited, or at least licensed, and so there's enforcement issues and other things. So this is looking at why people get licenses and why they don't. John MacArthur's paper on e-bike regulations in the United States, which we'll hear about in a second. The emergence of electric-powered two-wheelers on Asian roads, a curse or blessing from a sustainable transport perspective. And this paper was presented by Velasquez, who was at our workshop a few months ago and presented about what Embark was doing. So electric bicycle use and mode choice in Netherlands. See you, Aaron. Applying a theory of planned behavior for holiday cycling, empirical analysis of free-floating bike-sharing systems that actually includes kind of an e-bike perspective. That's in Germany. travel time and frequency of e-bike trips. This is in China, of men and women. So how far and how frequently e-bike riders ride in China. Factors affecting comfort of cyclists and mixed traffic flow. Again, that's a China-related one. Bai Lu was on our maybe 2 or 3 years ago, presented some of her work, and she's a co-author on a couple of these. So that group out of, I think, Southeast University is still producing a lot of these, a few of these papers. At least 2 of these are from that group on e-bike use in China and comfort and some of those operations. Okay. Safety behavior, that's Casey, and he presented something along those lines last year at the subcommittee. Traffic conflicts at intersections, that's another one, I think, from Bai Lu. Passing, and then the last, 5 get into operations, capacity, passing events, mixed bicycle traffic in bike paths, field test of comparison of e-bikes and conventional bicycles. That one's in Germany. That's yours, right? Yep. And I lumped that into operations because I don't know if that's really the right place for it, but that's kind of a, I'll let you explain what it is when we go around and introduce ourselves. And effects of bikes on saturation, flow rate, and shared right turns. Again, another operations China-related paper. So that's 15 by my count. And again, a lot of the operations ones are China-related, where you have enough e-bikes to actually see how they affect operations. Some of the other behavioral ones are North American, European, or policy ones. So with that, let's go around and I sort of pointed at people on a couple of these papers and say what you do, what your interests are in this topic, and so on. So starting with you.
All right. My name is Aaron Lee. I did a master's degree at TU Delft in the Netherlands. I've been working now for RSG in Burlington, Vermont, doing public transit market research.
My name is Chris Cherry. I'm an associate professor at University of Tennessee, and I am interested in e-bikes and their impact on transportation, environment, safety, the policy questions that surround e-bikes.
Casey Langford. I'm with the Center for Transportation Research at UT, and I guess also with Tennessee DOT long-range planning. Did my PhD with Chris using our e-Bikeshare as a platform to collect data and compare e-bikes and regular bikes from a sort of health and safety and just a behavioral standpoint.
I'm from Blair with Metro in Los Angeles, and previously was part of the PET committee, bike committee, and just got started. Most interested in how these technologies affect an operator, someone like ourselves who's both funding and or running services that will be impacted by this.
What influence do you have, Robin, on policy in?
What I used to have, and I'm still the director of planning, but I'm in my role will probably change again, but we used to be the ones actually determining, well, in examples, in the early development of the Segway, literally we were, with Dean Kamen, as the laws were being changed, and made recommendations on what was appropriate for that. California, the Metro is pretty influential in how laws are written for accommodating certain technologies, and we're, I mean, literally we'll be writing the laws and submitting them through to our representatives on a daily basis. So right now, I mean, using e-bikes as an example, right now there's really no regulation of any significance that is different from other bicycle operations in California. We'd like to keep that kind of stuff going unless we see a real safety issue, because we think that's probably for some technologies to develop, it really has to have a very open field to test. The original stuff with the Segway was to try and regulate it pretty narrowly. We basically just, and we were the ones doing it, which is basically just treated as a pedestrian until such times we have a problem and we'll change it again.
Yeah. Giving
the control to local jurisdictions if they wanted it, but most wouldn't act until they saw some problem themselves. So same thing with this. I think it's, with the exception of some regulatory requirements for power setups, which is something that we do with electric cars as well. The infrastructure that may be necessary might be something we would add in. But so far, we haven't seen much that is required.
We'll get to that more when we start talking about John's. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Jan Zander. I'm from the Technical University of Berlin in Germany. There I'm a student assistant at 2 places, one engineering department and one more into a psychological direction. I conducted a field test comparing an electrical bicycle to a normal bicycle in regards of speed and overtaking maneuvers. We haven't started into operation, but I'd say it's more about safety.
Okay.
I'm Hunter McCracken, a master's student at the University of Tennessee, mainly interested in the policy side of the implications of that on e-bikes.
I'm Ziwen from UT and working with Bikesharing. I'm interested in e-bike policy and safety programs.
John MacArthur with Trek at Portland State University. And like Chris, I'm interested in how bikes are used and travel behavior and safety and a whole range of bike issues.
You said Trek.
Trek.
T-R-E-K.
T-R-E-C.
Okay, sorry.
It used to be
They
O-Trek.
dropped the O because they do
No,
things
no,
besides
it's going to
just
Trek to
O.
the manufacturer bikes.
No,
no.
no.
Well,
It isn't.
that could be confusing.
Yes, they could.
Trek with a C.
Yes.
Brian Mayer, BTTI. We're interested in some bicycle research, so just come here to kind of see what's.
Okay.
Morning. My name is Ruba. I'm from Southeast University, and my course is the safety, the behavior, electric bicycles.
And she, you presented 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes.
Come sit at the table. You don't have to sit. I think you have at least 2 papers in this list that you're the lead author on. So you've done a lot of work related to electric bicycles in China. Yeah, good. Okay.
And me.
Yeah, there you are. See, I told you to sit at the table.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're behind me and I can't see you.
Christopher Dowis with the United States Federal Highway Administration. And I guess my interest is policy, and I'm also interested in the e-bike from the transportation side, where I think we're thinking about how can we be more permissive. And then there's the recreation side, because I deal with the recreational trails program, where an electric bike clearly is a motorized vehicle and probably should be prohibited from an otherwise non-motorized facility. So I have to play. Can I start coughing? Balance. Yeah. You can cough as much as you want. But I have a presentation later, so I'll shut up.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So I look forward to hearing all about that. So what we'll do next is we'll kind of rattle through 3 or 4 quick things, and the first will be me, and I'll introduce this. Let's see, how are we doing on that projector? You want to help line that thing up a little bit? There we go. Thanks. Good. So I am, first of all, I'm jumping the gun here a little bit because I have this banner on the top, Light Electric Vehicle Education Research Center, that John and I will talk about briefly at the end. But there's this presentation that John's seen before, a couple of you have seen before in here, on the state of light electric vehicle research, e-bike research, and where it's been going. There's this joint subcommittee. This is one of the research activities that I would say that happens related to, or research organization activities. About 40 people on the roster of, quote, members of the subcommittee. That number expanded dramatically when I started adding co-authors of all these papers. A couple of them are here now, so I count you all as, if you wrote a paper on e-bikes this year, as people that are interested in e-bikes enough to get emailed by me occasionally. Okay, we'll get into calls for papers, research needs statements. I think that a call for papers might be useful. But in short, this is about where we are on research over the past decade, There's a paper that Elliot Fishman and I wrote that's in review right now called E-Bikes in the Mainstream, reviewing a decade of research that touches on kind of the main issues related to e-bikes. And there's about 12, 15 papers a year that have been published. There's 15 right here in TRR. There's at least 4 or 5 others that aren't on this list that have come out since I made this chart. And so in 2015, there'll be probably well in excess of 20 papers that touch on e-bikes or are explicitly about e-bikes. And I know John probably and I and others in this room maybe get review requests from journals on e-bikes. There's been there's behavioral research that's come out. There's a lot of behavioral research in China, Asia, Europe, and Australia. North America is getting a little bit of behavioral research now that we have enough people to mark behavior. But I'm going to go quickly here. China, this is e-bike e-bike trip lengths, and we find that and mode shift. And mode shift on e-bikes has been more and more displacing bus and car trips than bicycle trips lately. Bicycle trips themselves are not substantial part of the shifted mode anymore, whereas it used to be in some cities, okay? So the big question, and this is the question I'll pose to my sustainable transportation bike lovers, is would you trade 2 bus riders for 1 car driver and put them all on, you could say, a pretty sustainable mode, an e-bike, okay? That maybe has got some challenges, but it also has some benefits relative to a car, okay? And so we'll see, I'm gonna say that a little later on at Transforming Transportation conference, and we'll see if that resonates at all, okay? I'm gonna go Vietnam. We did this work in Vietnam, but I'll just pass on that. In Europe, there's been 2 studies. Is this German naturalistic pedelec naturalistic cycling study? Is that your group?
No, that's the one from Chemnitz, I guess.
Yes, okay. So there's been a couple of studies on, and really not nearly as much as I expected, on Europe, and there's probably several in here. This obviously doesn't include what's on the list here. There's probably several in non-English languages and other things that I've not found, but that's something that I'm interested in. I could use some support from my European colleagues or colleagues that spend time in Europe to help find some of that information. North America, there was this bike share study that we did some interesting work, I think, in Sacramento had a qualitative study that was published, it's presented, I think, last year, published in a different journal. And then John MacArthur's did his nationwide survey, which is kind of the biggest, most comprehensive survey of e-bike users in North America for sure, okay? And then Australia had a study, I don't know who was first, Australia's study was first, and your study was after, but very similar to John's, or John's was very similar to Geoff's, and did a nationwide survey of e-bike users and found interesting findings, okay, that you can read all about it in the paper itself, but there was some car displacement and other things that we like to see from e-bikes, okay? Safety research. Now, there's a lot of safety research in China, and by safety, it's not the traditional safety research that maybe we do in North America, where we have reams of crash data and we analyze all the covariates of what causes crashes and what influences crashes and so on. China's more raw primary data collection, where you observe conflicts, you observe crashes, and so on. So there's perception behavior information in intersections and so on. There's quite a bit of research on this, but a lot of it's really qualitative. It's very difficult to have the volume of data needed to say anything meaningful about safety of the e-bikes. In China, e-bikes with at-fault crash history generally have lower safety attitudes. Again, better e-bike performance makes users state they behave better. This is contrary, this is US-based finding. This is contrary to Langford's, which basically saw that e-bike users behaved as badly as bicycle users, or as well, depending on your perspective. Okay. In China, there's the main studies on safety in China have been related to crash and hospitalization data, and there's been a couple of studies, 2010, 2013, 2014. If you see the fine print, most of these studies have been in the last 3 or 4 years, where there's finally been some data that somebody's been able to get their hands on. And the take-home message from the crash data at hospitals basically is that the burden of injury is increasing because, of course, the numbers are increasing dramatically. This one point here, the crash safety metrics are going up nearly as fast as the numbers are going up, meaning they're not going up as fast as the numbers are going up. That is, per vehicle, things are getting a little bit safer. And there are many challenges, of course, with this. Basically, they're a vulnerable mode in a mixed environment, and so intersection crashes and so on are serious. Okay, motor vehicle collisions are the most serious. I don't know if you have any data on, and I haven't found a lot on e-bike to pedestrian crashes, which is what most people care about when they think about regulating them. Most of the burden is e-bike riders getting creamed by cars, okay? And so that's one of the main challenges, I think, okay? Head injuries, almost every safety paper at the end says e-bike riders should have compulsory helmet laws in China because there's a lot of head injury, hospital data that shows a lot of head injury. And that's in part because e-bikes in China are fast and heavy and in mixed traffic. Okay.
How fast?
The rule is, the rule is 20 kilometers per hour, which is slow, but the practice is well above that. And most Chinese cities, it's over 30 kilometers an hour is the top speed. Of course, you're in mixed traffic and so on. I think that's kind of the main thing that China's e-bike industry can do, is whether they regulate themselves or whatever else, is try to manage that speed issue. Because they keep pushing that.
If they're in mixed traffic, wouldn't it be better if they were going more at the speed of traffic?
They're in mixed bike traffic often. Okay. So there's often, that's a good point, is the e-bike industry, people might say, I'm not going to speak for all of them, but I've heard them say, we need to go faster because we need to mix in with cars. And we're losing more and more of our bike infrastructure. So more and more times when we drive through a city, we need to go the speed of the cars. That's just, the other side is they're in segregated bike lanes facilities. That's what they're legally supposed to do. And then you end up with, like a vehicle on a cycle track, you end up with different flows, different conflicts. And when you have speed involved, you end up with more crashes. There was a famous, and I've got a video of it, there's famous memes that made news of e-bike rider getting run over by a car, and everybody came to the rescue, lifted up the car, and that was one of those viral videos, and the viral part was 20 people came and lifted up a car and pulled the person to relative safety and took them to the hospital to recover. The interesting part about the video, though, is a car just ran over an e-bike rider as they were doing nothing wrong, and that person is going to go be a data point in one of our studies. The driver will not be a data point in one of our studies. So this highlights the vulnerability issue. And that person was not driving particularly fast, neither the e-bike or the bike rider, the car driver. But there's just a mismatch of mass and so on. And that's something that's well known among safety researchers. Okay, we're going to keep on here. E-bike. Let me just keep going. Okay. So there's 2 studies that are new, 2014, both of these in Europe. So these are our first kind of hospitalization type studies, or primary crash data studies that we've seen in Europe. 23 hospitalizations in Switzerland. The severity is not as severe as China. Basically, people are going, there's mostly single vehicle crashes, people crashing by themselves, and there's higher helmet use. Okay, so the severity rates of these 23 e-bike hospitalizations that they dissected are low. In Netherlands, they looked at 294 e-bike crashes and compared those to a whole bunch of bicycle crashes, and basically found that there's very little difference between how e-bike riders get injured versus cyclists in North America, or regular bicyclists. So the idea is, if e-bikes displace cars, they could have positive safety benefits, which is kind of an interesting finding. Okay, we talked about this last time. I'll pass on this. This is Casey's work on behavior. The idea is e-bike riders behave just like bicycle riders when it comes to traffic control devices and greenways and so on.
The one critical thing here, because it affects every other number, is the e-bike rider is faster than the bicyclist. I'd also add probably they're less experienced because it takes them beyond what I call it, a developing set of experiences. They're faster.
Casey, they're faster?
Yeah, it's usually a higher average speed, but a lot of our bike riders would show a higher sort of top speed, or we used, I think, 85th percentile or something speed to kind of show the top end. So the bike riders, they'll get up to a faster speed, but on average, they're not going quite as fast.
Yeah, and my point would be that the person who can get and exceed that speed is someone who trained to get up there, much more, better responses.
Some of our users are, I guess, were kind of avid bike riders, but not all of them. So you have a good mix of people represented in that study. So
our e-bikes were not built for speed, and neither were our regular bikes in our system.
Yeah, my point is a recreational rider, or what I call an intermittent rider, is going to ride about 12 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour on average. Your e-bike guy is going to take that to the top speed at 15 or so, somewhere close. And that 3 miles an hour difference is a big deal for how often they'll get into a problem, or the severity of the problem when it happens.
I think one of the things in Tennessee, at least, we have hills. Okay, so that's kind of an underlying context of that. So there's the e-bike riders were able to maintain a more constant speed, and that's why their average would be higher than a bicyclist who really have to slow down on some of the hills and then really go fast on the other hills. So I'm gonna write about that. And this is one of the issues on a shared use path or something, is if you're going 2 or 3 miles per hour, which is faster.
Well, I actually deal with 2 kinds of paths. So.
Yeah, if you're going 2 or 3 miles an hour faster than a bicyclist, what is the real impact of that on average? Okay.
And then to add to that, I think you're 35 pounds heavier on an electric bike.
Yeah, so there's more weight. The question is, what's the mechanics of the crash? If a crash happens, is it?
Our e-bikes were,
they're heavy.
50 pounds or something.
Regular bikes.
Well, 50 pounds total.
Okay, so about
The regular bicycles are 20 something.
It's 25.
I would say that another potential difference could be in the acceleration of the e-bikes. I would think that they probably accelerate faster than a biker would.
Yeah, sure.
Even a stronger biker would be able to accelerate.
Yeah,
And sitting in, and just from kind of my own experiences sitting in car traffic, that can make a significant difference.
Yeah. From a safety perspective, that's one of their, or from a safety perception perspective, we don't have any safety data on that. That's one of the big benefits, is you can actually get off the line and be in traffic, basically easier through the intersection, whatever you want to do. That said, you're accelerating when maybe you shouldn't be not accelerating so much. Who knows? Okay. There's no information about this actually out there for those specific safety outcomes that we're looking for. Okay. Health research, there's been more and more, 5 key studies, 4 of which are European, on health related research, how e-bikes influence health. Overall, the overall finding of all these is, especially for sedentary adults, e-bikes are in great way to improve your physical activity. Okay, so relative to bicycling or other modes, for a fixed, I have to think through this. For a fixed course, e-bikes clearly use less energy, okay, than a bicyclist. A bicyclist for a fixed course would use more energy than an e-bicyclist, but e-bike users, it's certainly better than alternative modes for fixed times. It's e-bikes also use less energy.
So that's the question. Is it an introduction to physical activity that wouldn't happen without it?
So yeah, at our workshop, we had there's one of the people that is the poster children of the e-bike industry, is somebody who was very overweight and obese and tried to ride a bicycle but just couldn't, and then got onto an e-bike and gradually over time got into shape and is
Did
now
it transition now from an e-bike to something else? Or
yeah. So now this woman is doing these sprint triathlons and has recovered her life with the help of an e-bike. So this is like I said, the Jared of the e-bike industry is what I said.
So this is swimming instead of jogging. So you're getting people to do something they wouldn't do
Yeah,
otherwise, and then
that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
But you can also look at it as, because, we found a lot of the e-bike purchasers were older adults.
Yeah, so the
So that you could say they can maintain their physical activity
Yeah.
as they grow older.
And that's one of the main markets, not people that are necessarily overweight, but people that have chronic knee problems or back problems or some other problem. And Casey found this in his research when he interviewed some of our users. Like, my knee does not allow me to pedal hard up Tennessee hills. So the e-bike allows me to get on a bicycle.
The other thing I was looking for is whether this would allow them to join people that weren't on electric bikes that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do, and then that becomes part of the socialization that's necessary to get people to go out in groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that anecdotally in some aspects where you have groups, whether it's a spouse and a spouse or someone else, that one will be on an e-bike, the other won't, and the one on the e-bike will be there to keep up with the other. So gotcha. Okay, let me. There's interesting research on. Let's keep going. On freight, fleet, other sort of shared e-bikes. SF Scoop program. We may have that person online, or maybe not. One of the is one of them, and LEVs. These light tandem two-seaters in Paris are mixed into their car share system. San Francisco's value pricing system is mixing in e-bikes with their city car share so that somebody who doesn't need to carry anything or what is taking a short trip can take an e-bike instead of a city car share, and so on. Okay, so I'm going to just keep going here just to keep the time going. So pure safety research usually needs more detailed data. We don't have that yet. Basically because we don't have the numbers needed don't have the crashes needed to say much. There's a growing research base in the health arena. All of the studies have been these fixed course, fixed environment studies. I would argue that we need more kind of naturalistic, longitudinal type health studies, and so on. And then the behavior effect matters. Do you actually ride more on an e-bike than you would a regular bike, and how does that influence health? Okay.
What data are you guys collecting on the bikes that you guys have?
Nothing now.
Okay.
But before we
just have an electric bike.
We had
no, not even GPS or anything.
Yeah, we've got GPS from our system with e-bikes and regular bikes. So we've got a bunch of GPS.
What's the rate on the GPS?
Every second. Yeah. And so that was Casey's study, and so we have a bunch of data there that we can do a lot of work on. Just throw it in a grad student's lap and say, do it. So we don't know a lot about shared vehicles and other fleets, freight, and we don't know a lot about behavior. The point is there's been a lot of research, but we're still learning so much because this is a new mode. And then these are the two takeaways, is what I say all the time, is they're the most energy efficient mode of motorized transportation that I know of. I've not seen one that's more energy efficient. And then you could say if you, in China's context, in the context of millions, tens of millions sold each year, this is the kind of largest adoption of some sort of alternative fuel vehicle, if you count it by vehicle, in the history of motorization, really. So I think it's exciting to be a part of. So, okay. With that, any questions for me? Quick questions, and then jump over to, I guess we asked plenty of questions along the way. And then also, if you came in and sign this and say your name while John gets set up here.
Just briefly, only that everything he's mentioned so far is really characteristic of bicycle and a little bit better. But if we don't have, this is why I'm always sensitive about removing trails. The bicycle community already recognizes that without what I call a really focused effort to create an infrastructure that complements that use, the bicycling diminishes. So anything that we do to reduce it is going to diminish.
All right. So I'll make a big distinction between a transportation trail and a recreational trail for like the hikers and the mountain bikes.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so that's always my concern, that this still requires, or is at least preferentially, would do better if the infrastructure supported general bicycle use versus having to compete with just a normal traffic lane. That's the reason focusing on it is because if you don't build that infrastructure with it, it's going to
agree with you.
Okay, absolutely. Right. As long as you agree with me, all right.
Yes.
Okay. Introduction.
Sure. Mary Beth McGowan. I'm a government policy advisor on federal issues in Washington.
Yes.
And I'm Rick Huey with Westat. Just into the general driver behavior, motorcycle pedestrians.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
My name is Daniel Reis. I'm from Munich, Germany, from the university there, and we are in the research project about e-bikes, and we're trying to implement an e-bike sharing system in Munich, and we are searching for optimal station distribution.
Pretty good. Okay. And yeah, yeah. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of a paper that we did. We had a poster last night on the e-bike regulations. We actually produced a report where I'll pass this around as a copy. I don't know if you've seen it or not. And so let me just give you a little bit of a teaser what's in that and what the paper was about. So, so right now the e-bike regulations are at two levels. One, there's a federal level, and then how states, basically regulate the use of e-bikes. At the federal level, we have an e-bike rule and definition that is at the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Basically, says a 2- or 3-wheeled vehicle with fully operable pedals, less than 750 watts, and can go about 20 miles an hour or less. There is some interesting context. We'll talk a little bit later about S-pedelecs or fast pedelecs and how they relate to this definition, but I'll go into that in a second. But the key thing that I think everybody knows is that this definition and rule is really about manufacturing and first sale. It's not about the use. And so, and where that is confusing is that there are e-bike dealers and manufacturers that are using and users that use this definition in their states when they are being confronted about how they're using that bicycle, that they are then saying what they're riding is an e-bike, so they should be able to ride it as a bicycle. So at the state and local level that's where they develop rules around use and registration. And through our research, we basically did a scan of all regulations as much as possible and realized that they're regulated very differently and defined very differently throughout the states. So, and that can be both at the state level, but also at the local municipality level. So the state might have a rule where the city like Boulder or Eugene will do an additional rule about use on shared paths or something like that. So basically, here's a kind of an overview of which states have e-bike, specific e-bike definitions. Greens are, they have a definition, where the red is they don't. A lot of where they don't, I think, is really an issue of rules following technology. So these are really places that had like moped rules or motorized bicycles, and just really haven't kind of caught up that there's an e-bike. When we called, I talked to some people in Utah, which they do have an e-bike definition, but it's very circular in its logic, where in one place it says a e-bike is a bicycle, but then down at mopeds it says mopeds are e-bikes. And so it's this circular rule. So I was talking to some people there, and they said, yeah, we understand that, but there's not any e-bikes here. There's not an issue really. So when it becomes an issue, we might have to deal with the regulations, or that issue. So here's, I think, even shows kind of more the issue that these may be some, antiquated rules where power distribution, you see that they're, and it's very wide and varied, where some states will have different power requirements, particularly where the issue is they're different from the Fed rules. So you can either buy an e-bike. So in Maryland, they do not allow an e-bike that is greater than 500 watts. So a legally defined e-bike by the feds is not considered an e-bike necessarily in Maryland. But then in Oregon, we allow 1,000 watts. So, and we can get into a little bit about is motor power output important or not, but you can see it's very different. We also see some different speed limits around the country, that what's allowable, what's not.
You started to post it, but even quickly, is the federal law superseding any state law?
No.
All right, so it's all subject to state law.
Right. These are all about use.
Okay.
And how the bike is used. The problem is you have a product that you're able to buy.
Sure.
Then where and how can you use it?
Good. So state regulations.
You dealt with those pocket bikes, right?
Yeah, we've done.
And for those who don't know, the little mini motorcycles.
Yes.
And in LA, are they allowed?
I have no idea now.
I remember we had this discussion in this committee one time. I don't know if it's you who was leading it or someone else. Maybe it's Mike.
The only thing that I remember is that if you could pedal it, you could ride it regardless of the power source.
Okay.
Except there was a maximum power source and a maximum speed.
Okay.
But speed was probably the bigger regulator than anything else.
So again, another kind of restriction or criteria is minimum age. Most of them have minimum age. There are some states, as reds are where there's no issue about minimum age. But many states, especially the ones that are kind of moving forward with e-bike definitions, do require a minimum age, and it's typically around 16.
There was also an exemption for sub 4 mile per hour things made for children.
Oh, right.
It's an odd kind of language.
Like toy,
Oh,
where they
yes.
consider it as a toy.
Yeah.
And then finally is driver's licenses and registrations, where there are states that require licensing. And again, I think these can be correlated to states that have, moped rules where these bikes fit under the idea that they're mopeds or motorized bicycles. But it becomes very interesting. There's a case in St. Louis recently, and we see a lot of this where there's people that are going to e-bikes. Many times are people that may have had their license taken away because of DUI. So they move to a e-bike as a personal transportation device. But if you live in East St. Louis, you can ride a e-bike without registration or licensing at all. It's considered a bicycle. But you commute over to St. Louis, and you can be ticketed for riding without a helmet and a license. So, because that's what is required. So we do see a lot of the same would be over in Kansas City. We see kind of issues with how different states regulate the use of this. I brought up S-Pedelecs a little bit earlier. So this is where these are coming on the market. They're classified as a separate bike in Europe, but we don't really have necessary regulations dealing with the use of these, and also we're not necessarily certain how the Consumer Product Safety Commission looks at these, because
pedal assist.
They're pedal assist, and that's where the industry has kind of decided there is maybe a gray area. I'm not going to say a loophole, but their contention is if you're not pedaling this, it's not moving. So if you remember the federal definition, it says when it's solely under motor that it goes 20 miles an hour. Well, solely under motor, this doesn't move. So is it a e-bike or not? Because these are coming out, the industry is kind of gearing up to try to help kind of maybe make this clear for them, because if it's more clear and we have a better kind of understanding of definitions, it helps them sell their products. And I think that's what we all want, is at least a level playing field. So the Bicycle Product Suppliers Association is coming out with maybe some new product classifications that they're trying to test and then put towards some state rulemaking, specifically in California, and then maybe even moving towards New York. The lines that have the asterisks are where the suppliers have their definitions. So they're on motor engagement, if it's a pedal assist or not, motor speed, and then where those can be used. What I else, this table also talks about is these different aspects where we saw regulation and use. The question is, do these also need to be in the definition or not? So does power of the motor matter in a definition or not? Do functional pedals matter or not, in the definition? Wheel size, shape of, e-bike, weight of e-bike, I'm not really sure, age, or how much required or not. These are things that need to be, I think, discussed and included in these definitions or classifications. So finally, there's my information. A lot of this stuff is in that report. And then we recently and I'll just show you for people, if they do have information, or we're interested in getting more information about what's happening at the state level, we've created this kind of map where you can kind of click on that. It gives you all the necessary information about the state. But we're hoping that as rules get changed or updated or whatever, we can kind of update this map.
You can find that by going to the research.pdx.edu.
Exactly. And that's it. Any questions?
Just one quick one. Is age 16 mean anything to anybody?
Does it mean anything to
Yeah,
anyone?
I mean, it keeps.
Why not 15?
Well, I think.
Well, or even a 12-mile-per-hour vehicle at age 12 versus something greater than age 16.
Yeah. 16. I mean, it's basically under car licensing. Right? If you can drive a car, you pass some type of licensing, and I think that is a holdover from moped rules.
Okay.
In that, hey, kids can start riding, but you need a license, and that's where we, as kind of a society, said people can start operating on the roadways.
It's arbitrary.
But it's arbitrary.
Yeah, but the problem we have, and I'm just thinking in a broader sense, was that we've limited mobility from age 10 to 16 to my mom drives me someplace or my dad drives me someplace. So there's no means to do that other than a bicycle. And if I'm riding a bicycle, sorry?
Or public transport.
Sure, but at some point, I still am, between those ages, limited to someone else servicing, or a bicycle, which if all our other characteristics are the same, what difference does it make to us, other than we may want to regulate speed because the accident or the skill level is different as we get to higher speeds. I'm just curious because eventually some of this stuff is going to come out as what do we support and not support based upon the research, I don't see anything that says age 10 to 16 is any different than a bicycle, other than, like I say, possibly the speed.
I think if e-bikes are not allowed on sidewalks, then a 10-year-old in mixed traffic is, forcing a 10-year-old in mixed traffic is
in
not-
LA or
it's-
in California, a bicycle is allowed on a sidewalk unless specifically designated as no. So that's any bicycle.
So I think that's the point is e-bikes, some cities might say e-bikes are not allowed on sidewalks.
But do we
and-
see that anywhere?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so at that point, you're pushing people into the street,
Sure.
and then you better know what a red light means.
The way the law works in California is safe behavior.
Yeah.
If you're doing anything, a skateboard and or a bicycle or like e-bike, that by its nature is perceived by an officer as being unsafe, you're ticketed.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's an easy access.
And I think that's a rational way to enforce gray bike rules. There's plenty of gray bicycle rules in Tennessee, for example, and including e-bike rules. And if you're being unsafe, then that's a challenge. Now, I think this reflects a little bit more when we start talking about e-bike sharing, because when we did our system, I had an officer tell me all of your riders need to be wearing helmets, motorcycle helmets, and so on. And I said, no, I don't read the law that way. And John and I probably maybe disagree a little bit on that. But the point is, we can't, as an operator of a shared vehicle system, can't guarantee that all of our riders are going to behave safely. And
I'm much
that's a
concerned
challenge.
in the regulatory sense that anytime that you differentiate this between a bicycle, there has to be a very significant reason for doing so.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be pushed out as other ideas have been pushed out as highly regulated on its own, but somebody over here is exempt. It's the same characteristic.
But I think that's what the industry, from our workshop that we had a month and a half or 2 months ago, said was, we need to maintain that e-bikes are bicycles. Anytime that you go beyond that, and that's in some ways what some states have done, is that e-bikes are not bicycles. They're something very different. Right. And that's hard for the market. That's hard for e-bike manufacturers and retailers to sell something that fits in between. Okay?
Well, and it's increasingly harder for people policing because you almost, some bikes you can almost not tell other than, if you really look at like the Faraday, barely looks like an e-bike. I mean, it has a very small battery, and other than noticing the hub motor, you would be hard pressed to guess that it's an e-bike.
And this is one of the This is one of the challenges, I think, with Speed Pedelecs, is they look just like any other e-bike, and there's no sort of unified branding or sticker or regulatory registration or anything that says to a rank and file police officer who's never seen one of these or doesn't even really know for sure. And that's why enforcement's on our subcommittee that we have. Is anybody here from the enforcement subcommittee or committee? They said they were going to come, but anyways, that's a big issue. Okay, is how to get every police officer to know all the nuances of these rules. So, okay, Christopher.
Okay, I got some handouts. There's two handouts. I'll come around to the other side here. I can share these. These are two handouts. Take one each. I guess I'll go here. Christopher Dow's Federal Highway Administration. The handouts are, and for those of you not from the United States, nothing what I'm talking about applies to anything except the United States. Okay, but that's just the way I'm only responsible for the United States. So I'm sorry. We have. I'm handing out something from our website. It's called a framework for considering motorized use on non-motorized trails and pedestrian walkways. This may or may not apply, and I'm going to explain why it may or may not apply. The Federal Highway Administration policy is based on United States Code, and for the most part, this framework explains what the legislation is here. This is 23 U.S.C. 217. that it has a definition of use of motorized vehicles. Motorized vehicles may not be permitted on trails and pedestrian walkways under this section except for, and one of the exceptions is when state or local regulations permit electric bicycles. And then we have a definition of electric bicycle. The term electric bicycle means any bicycle or tricycle with a low-powered electric motor weighing under 100 pounds. So most of your e-bikes are well under 100 pounds, yes? And let me see, and top motor powered speed not in excess of 20 miles an hour. What's that, 30 kilometers an hour roughly? Okay. So for the most part, most of your e-bikes can be permitted if state and local regulations permit. So the difficulty with this definition, the other thing is that this definition only applies to a facility that has used federal aid highway program funds. If the facility has never used federal aid highway program funds, this policy does not apply.
So give me an example of one that would have a dirt trail.
Well, here's the issue, that if you're going down the street here, let's say a regular shared use path. Let's say the Washington Old Dominion Trail out here in Virginia, where I live. Parts of it were built with federal aid funds. And so this facility would apply, or this would apply. Where the state would have to have a regulation, state or locality would have to have a regulation to allow the bicycle. But parts were built without federal aid funds. Well, if I'm the user, how can I tell the difference?
Thank you.
Okay, the policy, so again, these are the problems with the policy. It only applies to a federal aid funded facility. It requires the state or local government to have passed some kind of enabling legislation, which, some have, some have not. The policy, and here's my concern actually, because I think from the e-bike perspective, the federal government is basically saying that the e-bike that meets this requirement of under 100 pounds or 20 miles an hour or less, it's up to the state or locality to decide. We don't care at the federal level. Where the problem is actually some of these other electric devices, like the Segway, because the Segway does not meet a definition of an electric bicycle. And therefore, it doesn't meet the definition, Segway doesn't meet the definition of bicycle, and therefore, this law that can permit the electric bicycle actually would not permit a Segway. I don't see anybody going out doing Segway regulations around here, because we have they're used on occasion. So, because the definition of bicycle is a vehicle having two tandem wheels propelled solely by human power upon which a person or persons may ride. And it's the tandem wheel thing that will distinguish. Now, we anticipated in the mid-2000s, our office proposed, in fact, the U.S. Department of Transportation proposed through legislation to fix this definition to basically make any electric device that can function sort of like a bicycle, just give it to the states, localities, and it won't be our issue. That legislation has not yet been enacted. Then you brought up the CPSC definition, and so we have bicycle advocates that claim that CPSC says that you have to treat the e-bike basically like a regular bicycle no matter what, right? Well, CPSC regulation, a regulation is at this status, a law is at a higher status. So a regulation cannot supersede a federal law. Also, the federal law, the regulation says this is what it is. This is how you can manufacture it. And then correct me if I'm wrong on this. It's how you can manufacture and sell the item, but it doesn't say where you can use an item. The federal law applies to where you can use this item. The problem with the federal law, and well, I don't know if it's, I'm not going to call it a problem. The issue with the federal law is that only applies to federal aid highway funded facilities. So what we have is a situation of the public, I don't know if this facility is federal aid funded or not. So there's some of the disconnect. There's no real national policy on what an e-bike is and where it can be used. So that is giving you a nice presentation of we really don't have much to work on, and where do we go from here? So I'm giving you information. I don't have an answer.
Christopher, one of the things that recently came out was the Park Service at Moab came out with policy regulations around motorized bicycles, but only for Moab. You know, like they.
Okay.
So explain a little bit about how, you know, an agency like the Park Service works and how they can regulate at one park versus another park.
Okay,
And
good.
Smoky
That's good.
Mountains also has the Cades Cove loop that the concessionaire has
Okay.
e-bikes. And
The Federal Highway Administration's policy would apply to federal aid highway funded facilities. The Federal Highway Administration is not a land management agency. So each of the federal land management agencies, the U.S. Forest Service, which is part of the Department of Agriculture, the Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, which are all under Department of the Interior, each of those agencies is responsible for doing regulations for its either agency-wide or for individual units. The Park Service is a very decentralized organization and will do regulations often at the unit level. And they'll publish it in Federal Register, and it will be an official regulation for the Park Service. In fact, this is sort of a side note, I'm going to say it anyway. On this sheet that I gave you here, we actually have an exception, the way we treat the segways. This is not an e-bike thing, this is a Segway thing. A Segway that is used by a person who has a mobility impairment. The Federal Transit Administration has ruled that the Federal Transit Administration has ruled that a person who has a mobility impairment that claims that the Segway is my wheelchair must be permitted on transportation facilities, and that's for any transportation facility using any federal funds and any public transit entity. The exception would be this would not apply on federal land management agency lands because the federal land management agencies control their own land and they have their own regulations. And my understanding is the Forest Service is coming down really hard on the use of segways, and then you also get into areas that start getting to wilderness trails. Now, I do want to come back one thing I forgot to say. This policy applies to a federal aid funded transportation facility. If you're dealing with the recreational trails program, which is 0.2% of the federal aid highway program is for the recreational trails program. That happens to be the program for which I'm responsible though. If you have a recreational trail that's always been for non-motorized use, and by this meaning hikers and equestrians, and it's really not it's not a transportation facility. Right. So it's the hiking, equestrian trails. I'd probably say the mountain bike trail though. If it's a non-motorized facility, the electric bike would be considered a motorized vehicle that would not be permitted if it is a recreational trails program funded trail that always has been for strictly non-motorized use. So this probably wouldn't affect the transportation system that much if it's always been like the hiking equestrian trail. Yeah. But if it's the shared use path kind of thing, like rail trails that's intended for bicycle transportation use, this policy for, basically it can be a permissive policy for electric bicycles would be allowed, okay?
The industry is going in, I don't know if they're going all in, but they're going in on the mountain bike scene, the electric mountain bike. And that's, some people like that, some people don't. The industry sees it as a big growth opportunity. And clearly or it seems like that would be prohibited if it was in the federally.
If they use recreational trails program funds, and again on the federal land management agencies. That would be.
And Moab might have been one of the things that Moab was sensitive about because because that's where you
So
go.
let me ask this exemption again. Do your hiking and equestrian trails allow mountain biking?
Some do, some don't. It depends on the manager of the trail. Because it's up to whoever manages the trail. Now, there's a trail that I like to walk on along Bull Run here, between Fairfax County, and it is a hiking and equestrian trail. It is not for any bicycle use at all whatsoever, although you see them out there illegally on occasion. But no, an electric bike certainly would not be allowed on something that doesn't allow bikes in the first place.
Well, that's a question, except that, let's go with the aging population. I can only take this trail on an electric mountain bike. It's the only accommodation that's reasonable. I can't take a Segway. I don't ride a horse. So now, are you going to prohibit me on the basis of my disability?
Aha, that goes into another issue where it's that's the Justice Department thing about other mobility devices. And if you, but see that then the restriction would be to a person who has a disability.
Plus
So I can't just say one day, I decided I want to ride my e-bike and I'm going to have a disability because I want to have one.
Yeah, but impairment and disability are different, and I need an assistant who is not impaired. Okay. So it's not
Too bad. This does not apply to the alternate person. Even the Federal Transit Administration exception only applies to the person who has the disability.
Okay, it'll be some interesting legal reads on this one. So.
Yeah. All right.
Any other questions for Christopher?
Okay, and I'll get
who just a quick historical footnote. How did e-bikes make it onto the FHWA radar? Was that you?
No, it was, I think it was actually League of American Bicyclists got it in there in the T21 legislation back in 1998.
Wow. Okay.
If I am remembering this correctly, I think it was put in, this electric bike definition was put in, I think, in 1998. We wanted to make an amendment for what became Safety Lou in 2005. But our proposal was actually in 2003. We wanted to change it to electric device to make it more permissive, because that's when Segways were brand new, and we just wanted to solve the problem all at once. And but Congress just didn't get around to enacting it. It's the issue with this thing is it's not. It's important maybe to us, and it's important to a segment of society, but it's not going to make or break the congressional negotiation, so it doesn't rise up to the high enough thing that people actually take action on. It hasn't become a problem enough that demands a solution.
Right. I think that's a consensus that we've heard with a lot of the policy issues is that. Yeah, the e-bike industry says we want to sell e-bikes, so we need a solution. But right. Anyways.
Okay.
Bernardo just walked in, and you want to. You have the floor.
I don't want to take any or my work. So I just wanted to say hi and check in.
Okay.
We hear all the stuff during committee meetings, I'm sure. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the new venue. Hope you're enjoying it. Hope you're finding your way around all right.
How many times have you said that this last 2 days?
He's just a recorder.
Yeah.
Yeah. I now just move my lips.
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions for Bernardo? He's a TRB staff, for those of you who don't know, and has helped with this subcommittee. I sent him an email, I think 2 days ago or something, saying, can you please change something on the website? And within I think 4 minutes or something like that, it was done. And so, yeah, it's very, very good, responsive, helpful for us, and so on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right. So if no questions, we'll move on. You're welcome to stay as long as you want, or not. Okay. Yeah. Sure thing. It's so next down the agenda, we'll have Aaron Lee, who's I didn't know if that was a Dutch name or not when I emailed him, and it turns out it's not.
I'm the one with the Dutch name.
Yeah, right. I still don't know how to pronounce it, but anyway. So Aaron, he introduced himself earlier, but he's going to talk about the work he did in Netherlands for his master's work
quickly. Yeah. So did a master's degree in Delft, and I work now with RSG. Not really so much in bicycles, but who knows down the road. Always been an interest of mine. Was very fortunate to do this piece of research. It wasn't a huge project. It wasn't a thesis. It was just kind of a project. But with Eric Mullen and Kees Maat at TU Delft. And we kind of asked the question, what's the impact on mode choice? This electric bicycles, new mode, and what trips, if any, are they replacing? So you see here, sales increase from 2006 to 2013. This is in percentage of new bicycle sales in the Netherlands, and it's an indicator. Basically, it can be seen as, look, this is clearly increasing as a segment. It doesn't mean that 20% of bicycles out there are electric. It just means that 20% of new bicycles sold were electric. There's a lot of used bicycles.
A lot of old bicycles.
A lot of old bicycles floating around the Netherlands. We've been talking a lot today about varying definitions. So I added this slide in last minute. I wanted to be clear about what we're talking about in this study. Generally in the Netherlands, you've got something that looks like a typical Dutch style city bike. So sit upright. It's sort of a relaxing ride. You've got a battery on the back. Sometimes they're in the frame. I believe the European regulations, the power will decrease once you get to 16 kilometers per hour, and then shuts off entirely when you get to 25 kilometers per hour. So here's a research question. Talked about that already. So what we did was I targeted survey. We looked for electric bicycle users. There's an online version, paper version. We got demographic information, some general questions about use patterns, reasons for use, general purpose, things like that. And then a one-day electric bicycle travel diary where they made notes about all of their e-bike trips for one day. We also asked in that for each trip, which mode would you have taken if your electric bicycle was not available? And we had 217 responses from all over the Netherlands. You can see on the map there. And they're more or less concentrated in, it seems fairly representative of where the people are in the Netherlands. So it's pretty even geographical distribution. Some demographic information. You've got gender in the upper left, a little bit more towards female, but really pretty even. And I think the U.S. who did the U.S. The U.S. study was overwhelmingly male, right? Yeah. So that's a difference that you see in the Netherlands. Age distribution is centered around 60. So it's a pretty old population that's using these.
I think 60 is pretty young, to tell you the truth.
Pretty young. Okay.
Close, actually.
So, okay, so it's an older population that are using traditional bicycles in the Netherlands.
Do you know what is that chart right around 30? Does that follow the age distribution of cyclists, of people in Netherlands for regular bicycles, or is?
I mean, everybody in the Netherlands bicycles from age, well, if you're 3, you're in the basket on your mother's bicycle or your father's bicycle.
So this is
right?
clearly
So,
a vehicle for the older half of the population.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is also very significant for the aging American population as well. I mean, if this is what avid cyclists are starting to do once they have created a culture of cycling, should we expect the same thing here at some level?
Yeah, could be.
It just brings a new constituency, and I know you're looking for the aging drivers to be added into this. But this represents a pretty important trend.
Right. Yeah. At the bottom, I have vehicles per household of these respondents, just to give you an idea. They do tend to have 1 car per household, which is closer to the norm in the Netherlands. In the US, you might expect something more like 2, but it's closer to the norm in the Netherlands than 1. More than 1 electric bicycle, so a lot of people are in couples, something like that. And they also still have things like city bicycles and racing bicycles, the typical Dutch arsenal of various bicycle options. And so then just give this is the replacement mode slide per trip, number of trips. And you can see 41% of trips, people said they would have gone with just a traditional bicycle. 40% of trips, people said they would have gone with an automobile. And then, you know, some public transit, motorbike or scooter, walking, and only 2% would not have gone. So I think the automobile.
This is from the diary?
This is from the diary. So this is per trip. So I think the automobile thing is significant. It's notable. The other thing that's notable is these people, when asked about their sort of general attitudes, said that their electric bicycle is a replacement for their traditional bicycle. So they stated that more so than it's a replacement for their automobile. But you have all these people that say, okay, well, you know, if I didn't have the e-bike, I would have had to have taken a car on this trip. So the thought is we've got this older demographic. They're using electric bicycles because they're easier, because they're more comfortable as a replacement for their bike. And it gives them this option to stay on the bike paths instead of having to switch to car as cycling becomes more difficult. So there you go. I just mentioned that. Some policy thoughts. I think this is the study that we did is a pretty good first step, and it'd be great to see another one done now. And we collected this data 2.5 years ago now. So with the continued increase, it'd be very interesting to see how those demographics are shifting. And it would be great. We tried to get some trip length and distance data, but it just didn't work out that well. So it'd be nice when and if we design a new survey to make sure that we don't mess that up this time. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent. It's very interesting. I visited the Netherlands for the first time a couple months ago, and it was amazing. And Kevin Kryzak has a blog, and I don't know if he attributes this. This quote is attributed to him or someone else, but he takes the analogy that the reason there's so little cycling research coming out of the cycling capital of Europe is that it's such a utilitarian mode. It's like a vacuum cleaner in the US, and we don't do vacuum cleaner research, so
somebody does.
Yeah, somebody does. I'm sure somebody does in the marketing side, but the point is that it's so ubiquitous and utilitarian, it's taken for granted that they have this, it's automatic in every project, and then they take it for granted that they have such a wonderful, I guess, bicycling infrastructure and culture. So
I was going to bring up, based upon this study, most of you guys are too young to be on this committee.
That's right. Yeah, we're
planning for the future.
Yeah.
My guess is that if we do this again, that the age demographic of electric bicycle users will shift towards younger a little bit. And there was, when we started doing this, there wasn't a whole lot of awareness, and they've been in the news a lot in the Netherlands over the last few years.
But why do you think the trend will go down? Because if I'm used to doing it well, and finally I get old enough that my knees start to hurt, which is why I go to my electric or whatever reason we have.
I think more people will realize that it's an option for an easier and more extended bicycle commute, right? So So
you want to downshift in the older ages, you'll just see
an increase more
in the lower ages.
Yeah,
is that what
exactly.
you were?
Well, there's two things. If you're saying that they're going to take longer trips because they have an electric bike, which is one of the things that some of the other research said, that's one thing. If you're saying they're buying it because it's just a lot easier, you're just telling me they get lazy. Okay, because it is, as you said, a very utilitarian thing today to ride a bicycle.
Yeah, but if say your work commute is something like 12 kilometers, 10 miles, so this is a half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe, every day, morning and afternoon.
Right.
It's an option to make that easier. It doesn't necessarily mean that one is lazy.
Not lazy, lazier. Okay.
No, I wouldn't say that, because I wouldn't consider myself a lazy person. I work out a lot or whatever, but I would at times have a 40-hour commute on my bike, but it's 25 on my car. So but there's only so much time in the day to get things done. I might not be able to spend an extra 30 minutes or an hour a day riding my bike just to get to work.
Once I saw a shift to electric bikes, people tended to leave their manual bike in the garage. That's what I'm suggesting. So
Sure.
I'm just saying is once you start that, you don't tend to go back to the manual bike.
Yeah, the Dutch perspective is really about getting to where they need to go.
Okay. It's not health, it's utilitarian.
It's about getting to where they need to go. This is how they get around.
And the health is a nice byproduct.
The health is a fantastic byproduct.
In the last couple of years, and I would agree in that the industry is saying that bike sales are plateauing or decreasing in Europe, but e-bike sales are dramatically increasing. So there is a shift. And then when I was over in Amsterdam recently, and I was talking to a couple of people there, and they were like, you won't see an e-bike in Amsterdam, but you see them on the outskirts. So the people that are longer, and he said, that, and it's a full range of ages. So you're going to see some people adopting just because utilitarian.
So the thing is, I'm going to look at it is your data says that this is an overwhelmingly aging phenomenon today. So I'm just curious to see, what our assumptions are tomorrow.
So the industry in the U.S., when we had this meeting, and I'll talk about it in a second, is the first wave of the market for the U.S. was the Florida market. That's where things kind of got started, and retirees and so on. And they're looking strongly at the millennials now, the young, unlicensed urban dwellers, as kind of this next market in the U.S. So the other side, and then the people like me who've got my license the day I turned 16, and I drive every day. I don't do that, but my generation of people, my parents' generation of people, or maybe my parents' young friends' generation of people, are not their kind of primary target at the moment, it sounded like. And Larry Peasy, he's a e-bike industry president of Curry Technologies, he put up a slide on our thing, and a quote from Gary Fisher said, e-bikes are the next big thing for the bike industry. So went from kind of the road bike to the mountain bike, kind of expanded the market for bicycling and the bike industry, revenue and all the sales and everything that came with that. And then the e-bike is kind of this next frontier for the bike industry to just expand what they can offer in their market. So I'm going to pull the plug on this conversation so we can move forward. This is a joint, should pull the plug literally while I was talking there. John MacArthur and me and Geoff Rose have put together this is almost, frankly, this is an announcement more than anything, are putting together a research group, a consortium called the Light Electric Vehicle Education and Research Center. There you have it, almost, there we go. And so we're looking at light electric vehicles. E-bikes are kind of the primary focus now, but it could be e-scooters, e-two-wheelers, any sort of thing, even maybe light electric four-wheelers. We're not, it's just similar in some ways to this subcommittee scope, focusing on these emerging vehicles, okay? It's a group of folks from University of Tennessee, and Jennifer Dill and John MacArthur from Portland State, and Geoff Rose from Monash University. That's our kind of core right now. We're open to expanding outside of that. Who we aren't mechanical engineers generally. We're not people that are building a better composite frame for e-bike, or better battery for an e-bike, or better motor. So these are health people, transportation engineers, business people, business folks, logistics, freight, planners, policy folks. So the scope of this center is to focus on that. And the main thing we're trying to do here is engage industry, non-government advocacy, or other organizations, and academia who are interested in LEV research, light electric vehicle research, and bringing them together. We had this workshop about the beginning of November, focusing on kind of scoping our group, brought in industry. What are the main issues? We're focused on safety, sustainability, sort of what we call system impacts, health impacts. Is the health industry or the health benefits of e-bikes or disbenefits an interesting enough research area that we need to really consider that as a potential benefit or a potential driver? Market and behavior, and then there's a kind of a side study on freight type work. Are there opportunities for freight? And that's we're trying to figure out how that fits in, but that's one of the things that we want to do. Okay, so there they are. Yeah, and then just to go quickly, you cannot see the link at all down there, but we do have a website. You just type in LEVERUTK, you'll find it in Google. So we're looking at these kind of issues for these three, what we call customer stakeholders, which are the industry, government, and trying to bridge the gap between all of these groups. And then a secondary goal, maybe, or secondary step is we want to be a part of the, we're interested in the policy, we're interested in how our research can contribute to better policy, and so we want to support that, although government agencies and industry are working together already on developing good policy for e-bikes and for other, we recognize that the policy needs to be flexible enough to include, like Christopher said, electric devices or something like that, because it may not be in 10 years that the e-bicycle is the thing. It could be something else, or the Segway, or whatever. So I just wanted to sort of announce that. John, any comments on that?
No,
John's kind of my partner in this endeavor.
I think we're starting to solidify what we're trying to be and how we can interact and also grow as a kind of group. Mm-hmm. So the more the merrier, and you'll see more from this in the near future.
Right, I think so. So I think the main objective from our perspective is we need to develop a kind of a critical mass consortium of researchers interested in this area, so that we can go after bigger projects, so that all the, it seems like much of the e-bike research that is coming out are these one-off projects, like what John does, what I do, what you do, and we're interested in kind of developing a bigger research program that can look at the broad issue of health, for example, and write a big proposal to NIH or something for health of e-bikes, or a big one on safety, where we can look at the safety impacts and maybe get it funded by FHWA or someone else, okay? And so these are the types of directions we're hoping to go in. Okay. Thoughts or quick questions on that? Because
I'd love to add, my name is kind of a friend of the Geoff group.
Okay.
To, help out
Great.
and my resources.
Excellent. One of the things that I'm trying to do in my brain, at least, is figure out how the subcommittee of TRB, this subcommittee, interfaces with the research group that John and I are putting together.
Listen carefully.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move on. We're running out of time. I'm going to skip the scope. I don't think the scope's changed because we wordsmith. We spend time wordsmithing every year the scope. And I don't necessarily think we need to do that right now, unless somebody wants to read that while we're going through the next thing and raise an objection. Okay. One of the things we did this year, this is the business part of it, is we added AP. I always want to say O, but it's AP 020 to the sponsoring committee. So this is emerging and innovative public transport and technology. Okay, and this could be vehicle sharing or other sorts of technologies that exist that could be supported by or light EVs or e-bikes. Okay, or other emerging vehicles for that matter within our scope. So we added them. They're meeting right now, so I think you're representing them. Thank you.
Well, I'll be back there to give it.
Yeah. Okay. We talked. I think that we're at kind of a healthy size of our sponsoring committees. We could add more, but I'm not sure. Safe mobility of older persons, alternative fuels and technologies. Jonathan Weinert suggested, I think, that committee as one, and he's at Bosch now, and he's got a history with TRB and research from UC Davis.
Is there a health and transportation group? Because this is obviously going to start with us.
It's a subcommittee of a couple joint, parent committees.
So that's a group that should have at least some involvement.
Yeah, if that's a direction that research is going, then certainly we need to do that. I think health is kind of infiltrating TRB year by year more and more, which is good. And TRB is sponsoring active transportation, co-sponsoring with the collegiate sports medicine. I always mess up the acronym, but
for a conference
in April, I think it is. But that's active transport planning conference, basically. Okay. That's in DC. Yeah. It's at the Keck Center. Yeah. Okay. So health and transportation. Okay, I'm going to put a asterisk star by that. One of the things that one of the themes next year is connected multimodal vehicles, and it's in my mind that if the non-motorized modes want to get involved in that, e-bikes might be one way to do that. And so I just put a note that I'm not sure exactly how we would integrate that, but the next step is, or one of the next things, I'm going to go out of order here, is we need to think about a call for papers or some sort of organization of the e-bike theme at TRB. Now, we did that 2 or 3 years ago. We had a call for papers, and we received 7 or 8 papers, if I recall, and we accepted 3 or 4 of them for presentation, and maybe 1 or 2 for publication. And we should, but the papers came from all over the place. I mean, meaning all over the board of light electric vehicles. So we should, I think we should, at this point, I think we have enough critical mass of interest, at least, to organize another call for papers for next year's TRB, where we can actually hopefully put some bounds on what types of papers we're interested in. We might add that term connected vehicles, because I saw a connected bike in at your booth, I think. I'm not pointing at yours, but at Virginia Tech, with the big rig, and they had a bike with a DSRC reader on it, and e-bikes could be part of that future, perhaps. Maybe more immediately than bicycles, because you can build in the telematics to the controller units and so on. Okay.
That's kind of where that started, is with putting data acquisition systems on it, which is why I asked about the naturalistic.
Yeah.
With what kind of data you guys were collecting, because that's something we're trying to get them more involved in. I know, and I talked with a couple of people last year here, and I know that there are some other places that we're trying to.
Yeah, I think that's
naturalistic studies on bikes. So I mean, doing it on an electric bike really, I mean, at least
with electric
the way we're
bikes,
doing
really
it, it's not much of a difference. So
yeah. With electric bikes, it could be really easy, because you don't have to deal with the power stuff. And that's what we found with ours. It was very easy. Otherwise, you had to have battery packs. You had to switch out battery packs. It was a pain to do the regular bicycle stuff for the data acquisition. The e-bikes, we just plugged it into the power supply, and it turned on when the e-bike turned on, and it turned off when the e-bike turned off. It was great. Okay, so I think we should have some sort of call, and I'll organize that offline. We don't have to, but I think it should probably follow some of these themes that we've identified as kind of key research themes: health, safety, mobility, accessibility. These kind of the areas they're going. I really want to do is just organize these 15 papers that are all over the TRB right now. They're in all different committees and so on. Okay. The previous research, I'm just hopping around here, so bear with me. The previous research needs statement is now obsolete. Our previous research needs statement or synthesis statement that we put out the last couple years that never got picked up by NCHRP was about policy and a policy synthesis in the United States. What is the e-bike policies across the US? Jonathan took it upon himself to do that for us without the funding that one would get if they had an NCHRP or something like that, or a synthesis. So I've got thoughts about what the pressing research needs are, but any thoughts about pressing research needs in the e-bike world, or more generally the emerging low-speed vehicle world?
Say that again, maybe answer the question.
Any ideas or thoughts about what are the emerging research needs for low-speed electric vehicles, low-speed vehicles, e-bikes? Are there things that we haven't talked about? Safety, sustainability, health. Are there research needs that we should throw over to and the TRB, NCHRP process and see if they'll jump on?
I would suggest that at some point you need to research the preferential infrastructure necessary to promote a particular use, or likely to encourage use. Again, this is I'm beating my particular drum, but every time I see some new idea come out and there's not infrastructure to support it, it tends to basically strangle for lack of that essential piece.
There is an NCHRP right now out on bicycling infrastructure.
You might overlap it.
Yeah.
That getting new people into riding, is that the one that you're talking about?
Yeah.
I think it actually didn't it just close?
It closed. Yeah. That's what I mean. It's too late for getting into that.
Add a component, which is the preferential environment for aging populations to convert to bicycle and e-bicycle use.
Well, that one was specifically for. Were you aware of that? Familiar with that?
I wasn't.
Okay, it was getting new users into bike. What infrastructure facilities are needed to get new bicycle users? Not for the current bicycle users. We want to encourage more. They wanted to make it so more people would be riding bikes, and I think that would almost be this would kind of fall into that a little bit in the sense of, well, now we can even get more people because the people that just can't ride bicycles could ride a bicycle now, or could ride an e-bike.
Particularly if they had the infrastructure that supported low. Presumably low stress environments, because the people that ride e-bikes are not the most experienced cyclists. Or
so even they're going to even less be wanting to be on a road or something like that. Yeah, so having a bike lane, or
especially one that they're allowed to ride on. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll let that one percolate a little bit, and we'll see if we can put something together. Okay. Anything else on research needs statements? Okay.
Weather influences on e-bike usage in Europe is a big deal to get people on the e-bike because the cities are too crowded with cars. But nobody seems to think about what happens in the winter when it's cold and there's snow. What do the people who switch to e-bikes do then? Do they still have a car? Do they use public transport? Does the public transport still fulfill the needs for that many people?
Is there an assumption that it would be different than regular bicycles?
There's
I wouldn't say that. I think it's the same direction.
We did a study in China, and there was very clear weather and but it's mostly related to heat. Okay. Weather and air quality differences between somebody who'd choose a bicycle and an e-bike.
Okay.
Those with e-bikes would ride in bad air.
In bad air.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they would also ride on hot days instead of transit, basically.
Gotcha. It's important.
Yeah, and then cold days weren't as sensitive, obviously, to because bicyclists don't worry so much about cold as they do about heat usually. So, okay.
But they might worry about snow.
But snow, snow we didn't talk about. That's a whole different.
Equal comparison.
Yeah.
But you know,
Riding
I didn't. When I asked the question, I didn't know. I just was curious if there was.
Yeah.
Maybe
there's in our China study, there's a slight difference. The big model, weather and air quality come in, and precipitation come in different ways for bikes and e-bikes.
With the snow, there might be security issues if the motor is in the front wheel instead of the back wheel. I don't know if that's an important thing to do. But.
We'll ponder that, and I've got you as the idea generator there. So I might email you about that.
I mean, I certainly think freight and good transport is an interesting topic for more research. I mean, there's very little around this, and I mean, partly it's where urban freight is right now, but can e-bikes play within that role? We see the industry is already playing with this a little bit in Europe on small deliveries. So where can that be, throughout the world, or particularly in the United States?
Right. And that was one of the themes of our workshop. And there's certainly very cool, innovative things that are happening even in the U.S., I think, in relation to this.
There's a group out of Austin that just started and I call it a competitor to FedEx and UPS by using an Uber type of approach. If you have a bike with a box, you can stop by, pick up a package, and deliver it for $10. And I like that. That may be some pretty interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah. That's in Austin.
Yeah, Austin's got it. That's the startup.
Those guys aren't very innovative over there in Austin. They don't do.
What was it? Do you remember what it was called? I'm just curious now.
You can just you can search it based on the topic, which is
Austin,
Austin, Texas. But
Bike Messenger.
What is the name of it?
I wonder if the bike messengers are as mad as the taxi drivers.
It might just
well,
be.
No, but I mean, well,
it might just facilitate
like
their
managers. The bike messengers are probably like more jobs.
Yeah, just take out the middle person. Okay. Quick move on. One of the things that I have failed miserably on this subcommittee is keeping an up-to-date website and so on. Basically, when Steve Jobs took iWeb away from me, everything on my online presence froze in time. Okay, and I haven't had the energy or time to transition everything to new space. And so we need to rethink how we communicate with people and how we put up information. And this is actually something that for me is going to be very, again, complicated. If I have a website that's devoted to this or a Google site or a Google listserv or a Google forum where people can chime in, devoted to this group, and then I have a different one devoted to this other research program that's going to have some of the same roles and functions of being a clearinghouse of e-bike research or light UV research. So any thoughts on how we should organize our...
Have you gotten pushback or one of the other committees I'm on, we're getting told that we should be using my TRB to do all communications, and TRB wants. I mean, I wish. Yeah,
that would have been a good question.
Would be a good question. In that I think I don't know if they can do this, but they're trying to get away with from all these little TRB committee pages that are outside the system.
Yeah,
and that might answer your question in that what you can actually put on my TRB is limiting in versus what you can create on a Google Plus site or something like that.
But at the same time, it provides a presence that is official. Like, for example, when I reached out to the law enforcement committee, and all the committees that I've reached out to, it's like Google the committee, and then there's some obsolete web page that's probably as obsolete as ours. And then there's, a list of people that probably aren't affiliated with that committee anymore. And then when I Googled law enforcement, it took me to the TRB thing, had all the updated committee members and what they're into and where they're from. And that actually was, for my information gathering, very, very efficient. I was like, oh, that's perfect. This is the page. This is up to date. It wasn't very fancy. It certainly didn't have a lot of information, but I think there is some room in there to put some key info. And so that might be a way to do it, is just come into the system, and this subcommittee lives totally in the TRB system, and then other things we can link around and so on. Thoughts on that? somebody suggested having like a Google forum type of site where people can communicate, and somebody learns of a new regulation update, they throw it up there and someone sees it, and so on. Is that sounds like it requires some moderation and some supervision. I'm not sure if that's something.
I don't know much about it, but the state is using SharePoint for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Just to post information and log in.
Yeah, you have to have logins and other things for SharePoint. I think that's the problem, is we want our stuff to be non-exclusive to, I don't know if there's a public SharePoint version. And frankly, I just don't want to have to develop a system that I have to maintain constantly.
The other one that I'm part of, like, is the parking, they use LinkedIn, and they just set up basically a discussion group.
That's a good idea.
That works out pretty easily.
That's actually a really nice idea. That's probably a lot better than.
Well, it's very broad. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I'll go through 20 things pretty quickly, but you'll see the topic fast, and people are trying to make some conversation about it, and then, you know, it disappears for a while, and then come back up with the conversation.
So you're part of a LinkedIn group?
Yeah, a couple of them.
Okay, on this, that's what you're talking about, right? That is that the right term?
Yeah, you set up your topic, and anybody else in the industry that might have an interest also joins in you pretty quickly, searches them out.
Yeah.
You jump in and go.
Ah,
You're the
okay.
moderator, but the
It runs itself.
pretty broad, yeah.
Okay, it's a good idea. Okay. Anything else? We're going to continue to, John and I can continue with our group here, our center, and we will include everybody that's on this on our mailing list, and people that are online and so on in the discussions. And so in mid-year meetings and whatnot. Okay.
Do you have Susan Shaheen down for
Yeah.
multi-mobility? Okay.
Yep, I have her down. Unfortunately, she's at the meeting you should be at. So. That you will be at. Thanks for coming. Okay. So yeah, thank you very much. If you have any questions, particularly about this or me, if you haven't signed in, I think a couple stragglers came in, and please do, and make sure you're on the list. Okay. Thank you very much.
Do you want to keep these or no? Any purpose to keep them?
I will keep them.
You will keep them. Okay.
Yes.
Do I? Wait. Want to make sure I
Actually,
have
if I can get one more.
Yeah, this is a really nice synthesis of what.
Yeah, I do want to keep a copy for myself.
Okay. Can I waive this at the bicycle committee?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks.
Oh, I do have an extra copy here. Chris, you know Andy, correct?
Andy.
Alden?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. He wanted to come, but he had to
Yeah.
come somewhere else.
Found my copy.
Had somewhere else. That's why he made sure I was here.
Okay. Yeah, good.
But I definitely think, I think it'd be interesting to talk about some ideas potentially with, and I think he'd be interested in. We have someone else that's. So I'm assuming. Did you talk to anybody about the bike up there?
No, we walked
Okay.
past,
Okay.
but I saw it.
Andy worked on it with somebody else named Justin Owens.
Okay.
And he's not in our little tiny group of people, because some of the bike work's going to the other group.
Okay.
But I think we would all be interested in talking with you and
Yeah.
seeing. I mean, we've talked about kind of implementing the thought of implementing bike
Let me,
share bikes just
shut
because
this off
it's a great way. I mean, yeah, you've got all these people using